Free rides for the EDSA busway end this month and will no longer be extended due to budgetary constraints.
Instead, the government plans to privatize the busway's operations by next year to meet international standards. Gerard de la Peña with the big story.
The Transportation Department on Wednesday opened the Tramos station of the EDSA busway, making it the fourth station to become operational this year. So far, there are 21 EDSA busway stations from Monumento to Pitex in Parañaque. But Transportation Chief Jaime Bautista admitted that the facility is not up to par with global standards. That's why they are planning to privatize the busway by 2023.
Gusto natin, kung ipaprivatize natin to, talagang yung gagawin ng private sector will conform to international standards, no? Sigurado dapat yung mga pasahero natin hindi nababasa pag umuulan, hindi masyadong naiinitan kung mainit ang panahon, no? So siguro dapat maging komportable sila, no?
For now, commuters will have to brace themselves as free busway rides are set to end soon. Fares will be once again collected starting January 1 next year.
Walang naibigay na budget sa amin, no? Merong 1.2 billion, no, for contract service contracting, no. Pero napakaliit noon para ibigay natin dito sa EDSA busway, no. Kasi sa EDSA busway we spend around 10 to 12 million a day.
This is a burden for commuters, especially those who take the EDSA busway on a daily basis.
Ang hirap, tapos magkano na naman pamasahe, uwi ko pa, Cavite pa ako everyday.
Mabigat po. Sayang din po yung pamasahe, pangkain na lang din yun eh.
Passenger volume at the EDSA busway reached up to 400,000 daily during the holiday rush. There were 750 buses, but this will have to be brought down to just 600 as passengers are expected to transfer to other modes of transport like the MRT once the Libreng Sakay expires. Meanwhile, to augment the supply of public transport amid increasing demand, the LTFRB has reinstated and modified over 100 jeepney routes in Metro Manila. For News 5, Gerard de la Peña, we are One News.
Let's talk more about the government's plan to privatize the EDSA busway with Ira Cruz, Director of Transport Advocacy Group Alt Mobility PH, joining us via Zoom. Ira, good evening. Welcome to the big story. First, what do you make of that statement from the government as though it would only take the private sector to actually make the EDSA busway at par with international standards? Is that even the route that we should be taking?
Well, first of all, it's good that at the very least, the government is recognizing its shortcomings and is starting to propose ways to really improve transportation. As I was mentioning to you off air, the last 5 days have been nothing but news about transportation from the DOTR delivering on a promise to prioritize pedestrians and cyclists in the next 6 years. Social media collecting on Senator Villar's promise to even decimating media personality, and then this. No? So I think it's a welcome development that that finally the government is recognizing its shortcomings. In the statement of Secretary Bautista, is showing concern. And he's even mentioning that there's not enough budget allocated by Congress to address the issues, and if it takes the private sector to collaborate with government in finally addressing our transportation issues, then it's a welcome development. Okay. But I think it's very, very important for us to carefully unpack. What does it mean to promise this? What will it take for the government to deliver on these promises, and what does this privatization mean? What is the plan of the government? What would be the responsibilities of the private companies? What would be the responsibilities of the government? And I'm mentioning that because while the private sector perhaps has a lot of capacity in terms of addressing shortcomings of the government, there are certain functions that only the government can deploy, such as allocating road space, prioritization of buses and public transportation on the road, and then the list goes on. And I hope that the study that they're starting would consider these.
Okay, maybe we can focus a bit more on that. No, what are the challenges here for the government that needs to be completely privatized or tackled by the private sector, and what should be left on the government's agenda and under their responsibility?
Right. Well, there are various ways to privatize, no, or what they're referring to, which we suppose is a partnership or a PPP with the private sector. And one very important thing that only the government can address are things like franchises, issuance of franchises, updating of franchises. How do you prioritize? If you are going to, for instance, give metrics to a private company that they have to have a headway, for instance, of 15 minutes, which means that a bus is coming every 15 minutes. Buses have to be able to complete X number of rounds throughout the day. Things like prioritization on road, allocation of more lanes for public transportation. These are things that only the government will be able to answer. And that's the role of perhaps MMDA, DPWH, and all that. The private companies, on the other hand, can answer by way of operating, which is kind of already what's happening anyway already. Private companies are the ones that are running the buses on EDSA. But there's a lot of things that can be improved and must be improved. And hopefully, the study that they've commissioned or that they will commission would unpack all of these and identify all of these issues.
Okay, of course, at the root of all of these, of course, is commuter welfare. But mostly when we're talking about privatization, the immediate concern would be added cost for commuters. So is this going to be a point of concern here? And how do you think this probable partnership between the government and the private sector should at least address this particular concern?
Okay, it's a very tricky issue, because we have been calling for what we call service contracting. And that is not in any way entirely about Libreng Sakay. What this means is that the government needs to be able to, so obviously on the side of the passengers, there's affordability of public transportation. And on the other hand, there's profitability of operators. And in order for you to satisfy those requirements, the government has to step in by subsidizing in order to meet affordability and profitability, which means that operators must be able to operate without it at a profit, but at the same time, the commuters should be able to afford reasonably public transportation. And that's where government has to come in. And this doesn't necessarily have to come in the form of Libreng Sakay, but by service contracting or subsidizing that portion that satisfies those two conditions.
Have you seen use cases wherein privatization has made commuting more efficient and maybe cheaper?
We can look at the experience of, for instance, more advanced economies like Singapore, where the government provides for the units or the buses, and it's the private sector that operates it. So there are models by which we can make this work, at which privatization or a public-private partnership can work. But what's very important is that the metrics that they use would take into consideration the welfare of the commuters, so that, as Secretary Bautista has mentioned, pag naghihintay sila, hindi sila mainitan or hindi sila nauulanan. Those are things, or so that there will be a public transport option available at any given time of the day and at any given location in the country. So there are a lot of use cases around the country. The nearest to us is Singapore. In fact, if you look at their story and how they began rehabilitating their public transportation, it looks pretty much like where we are today. And within a span of maybe less than 10 years, they were able to bring it to a certain level that they already benefit from today.
All right. Well, that would be a wonderful thing.
That's dope.
All right. So thank you so much for your time. Alt Mobility PH Director Ira Cruz. Thank you so much.